The following is a local resident producer's program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of Oshkosh Media, the City of Oshkosh, or your video service provider.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm your host, Cheryl Hentz, and it seems like just a couple months ago, and it was in fact a couple months ago, that our guest was here, and she's back with us again tonight. So our guest this evening is Dr. Vickie Cartwright, Superintendent of the Oshkosh Area School District, and we're going to be talking tonight about the shooting that happened a few weeks ago here in our district. We're going to spend a fair amount of time on that, but we're not going to dwell on it for the entire show, and then we'll move on to talk about some other things. So anyway, thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
I told you when you were here, I said, we'll have you on again soon.
We just didn't know how soon, huh?
Yeah, we didn't realize it was going to be this soon, and, you know, because of the circumstances that you are here. But I'm glad that you made time for us tonight. So it's interesting because when you were on in October, we had talked then about the fact that you guys had just as a district recently met with the Sheriff's Department and the Police Department and kind of updated your plans for if there was an incident like this, some kind of a threat to one or more of our schools. And then as it turned out, just, I don't know, maybe 6-8 weeks later, lo and behold, we were faced with very much this kind of an incident. For people who maybe aren't aware of what happened, I think most people in this area are, but you know, for people watching this show on YouTube or whatever, the shortened version of it is there was a student who was able to stab the school resource officer in the neck a few times with a barbecue fork or
the turkey prodder that you use for like at Thanksgiving.
Yeah, or what you can use to turn things on a grill or whatever. And the officer tried to get to his taser, couldn't. He pulled his duty weapon, and a struggle ensued, and he shot the student. The student was not killed, and he survived. The officer survived, thankfully, and that's sort of the long and short of it. But it kind of walk us through how things happened to the extent that you can, because I know that there's criminal charges pending. This is probably still under some investigation, I would assume, and so I know that there are certain things you can't talk about, but walk us through the timeline, sort of, if you would.
Certainly. The very first thing, if you don't mind, I want to preface it just a little bit, because in Oshkosh we have an excellent relationship with our school resource officers and our partnership with the Oshkosh Police Department. The chief and I regularly meet. We meet almost on a monthly basis. You know, if it's not monthly, it's every other month, so that we develop a very strong relationship. Our school district has a team called the Epcot Team. And
it's called what?
Epcot.
Epcot, okay.
Basically, it's an emergency preparedness committee type task force. And it's comprised of your first responders within this area. So it has not only the Sheriff's Department, but Oshkosh Police Department, the Fire Department, Winnebago County, and a few some of our private schools are there as well,
Sure.
As well as other partners that attend this. And our district's been doing this for multiple years, which is great because when you have an incident occur, you're not meeting each other for the first time fresh. We have a relationship to where when we see each other, we can refer each other by first name.
Sure.
And we know each other.
Yep.
And with that, that extends into our SRO program because we partner on trainings, we partner on what interactions look like with students and those kind of things. And it's because of that partnership and the relationship that our SROs develop with our students that, because there's so much of that controversy out there. Oh, we don't want to have SROs in our schools because some people will view it as a school to prison pipeline.
SROs, school resource officers.
Yes, okay. Thank you. And so what ends up happening is if you don't have that type of partnership, that could be a concern.
Sure,
but in Oshkosh, that's not how we operate. Is because we have such a strong partnership. Our school resource officers value the relationships that they have with their students, and that's also why this particular incident was so troubling. Because this Officer Wissink had a relationship with the student. Student came in to see the officer to ask a question, and so the officer turned around to look onto the computer in order to help the student.
Yeah.
And that's when, unfortunately, he was attacked from behind. And even while he's being attacked, he's trying not to go to lethal force, right? Hence the taser, but he just can't get there. And so he was put into, unfortunately, a situation, a life or death type situation, and did not have a choice.
Yeah.
And so he had to draw his weapon. And so when he drew his weapon, there were 3 shots that were fired. One where he struck himself, because he's fending off the student from himself, because he's being attacked.
Yep.
And then the second shot, that did shoot the student. And then from there, so as much as possible, he was trying to ensure that he was able to contain the situation, even through, being attacked, being shot. He's still of mind and presence to, get out an emergency call, for help. Yeah. And to ensure that the student doesn't leave his office.
Right.
So he's just determined to do that, to protect the students of West High School.
And the staff.
Of course.
And the faculty.
Absolutely. Everybody there.
Yep.
And that's why early on, before a lot of these details came out, the community heard me saying, we are indebted to Officer Wissink. We are indebted to Officer Wissink.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And, you talk about how he accidentally shot himself, and I have to say that by and large, I'm pretty proud of the people in the Oshkosh community, but there have been a few comments made on social media. There have been some comments made amongst coworkers, not my coworkers because I work for myself, but just comments that I've heard have been made by some people in this community, snickering and laughing at Officer Wissink because he shot himself, kind of like he's a Keystone Cop or something.
No.
And, to those people, I have to say, if you're watching or listening to this, you really need to be highly ashamed of yourself, and you need to grow up and start acting like a damn adult instead of some schoolyard bully or whatever, because, he was fighting for his life. He was trying to protect everybody. And, to his credit, he could have shot and killed that kid, because I know for a fact that, law enforcement officers are taught that when you shoot to kill, and you shoot for center mass. So he did what he should have done to sort of deter the situation and stop the threat against himself or anyone else in the school or the surrounding neighbors of the school. But he didn't kill that student, and he could have, and probably was trained to do so.
And a lot of that are some of the unknowns, right? Because those are things. Those are some really those are some assumptions maybe, because we just don't know because we weren't there.
Right, yeah.
I don't know if he was shooting for center mass and it didn't happen because of the ensuit of the struggle,
That
or
could be.
he didn't
Yep.
because he was it's a student.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
just don't know.
Yeah, but to laugh about and make fun of someone because they shot themselves. There's a lot going on. You're bleeding profusely from your neck because he was stabbed in his neck. I'm pointing to this side. I don't know which side it was,
Sure.
but I'm right-handed, so yeah. But and there's a struggle happening. Yeah. Any number of things. Look at how often we hear about guns going off when people are struggling. Yeah. And you don't know where that bullet's going to go. So to make fun of him, I just think it's such childish behavior on the part of these individuals who are making comments like this. And, like I said, shame on them. This, when you came here a year and a half ago, I bet you never expected this to happen so soon, or even to happen at all. Kind of like baptism by fire, right?
Right. You train for it, you prepare for it, and you just truly hope you never have to use that training.
Yeah. How often do you guys train for this kind of stuff, Vickie? Like, I know when I was in school, we did tornado drills, we did fire drills. I have to imagine that stuff like this is a much more involved kind of training. And does it involve the whole school, or how does this work?
So we're actually a district that's remained very proactive over the years related to this. And fortunately, I have a background in this as well. So combined together, and then the backgrounds, of course, of our first responders coming to the table in those conversations can only make you stronger.
Yeah.
But there are some things that we have done that are truly innovative that many districts across the state have not done at all. So, for example, last year when I first came here, in August, we brought all of our administrative staff together. We went over to Lakeside Elementary School. We made arrangements. We had just went through our ALICE protocols, our training, to ensure everybody's recent.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that
absolutely, too. But so administrative had just gone through their training, and we went in and we had one of our not deputies, but one of the officers from the Oshkosh Police Department came in with blanks on a gun, and we all got together and then fired the blanks off in the school. Well, you're probably going, well, why would you do that? Well, the sound is very unique, and what you hear online versus what you hear in person is still a little bit different, right?
It is.
And so it was learning some of the nuances without going into a lot of details on that, of what is the difference between a locker slamming or a book being thrown on the floor versus shots fired.
Yeah.
So that's an example of one thing that we did last school year. This school year, at the very beginning, we were over at Carl Traeger Middle School, and we did a full-fledged scenario of shots fired in a school. And so first responders from this area participated with it, and that's what we were talking about last time. Yeah. And we had volunteers, which were from staff members and different individuals as that would pretend to be like, I've been wounded, or I'm walking the hallways, I'm being students. Yeah. And individuals who actually barricaded themselves in the rooms. I was there. I was one of the ones who fled, so I evacuated, as you might say, because I was in a position to do that.
Yeah.
But just to go through that experience firsthand, and learn and become a stronger, dynamic group partners, and how we interacted with one another in order to learn from one another so that we could be even better and more prepared. You hope you will never have to use it. But in the event that you do, you want to know that you're ready. Yeah. And even in this incident, we did not implement our full plan. Yeah. Because while there were shots fired inside of a school, it was not a school shooting.
Yeah.
And there is a major difference between the two.
Explain what that difference is, so that, because I'm not even sure I really understand it.
Sure.
It wasn't a mass shooting.
Well,
but see, I would still think of it as a school shooting, but you're saying it's not.
What I'm saying, a school shooting is more of when a student has the weapon and is
Okay,
firing the
gotcha.
weapon within the school.
Okay,
Okay.
gotcha.
And
And
there
that
are
makes
victims
sense.
involved and those kind of things. That's a school shooting
Okay.
versus shots fired within a school. In this case, the shots were fired by the school
the
resource.
officer. Yeah.
And it was, and he was in control of the weapon. In other words, he was the one firing the weapon, and not the student.
Yeah.
So-
Although the student was trying to get the gun, and yet I have read, and I can't remember where I read this, if it was in a criminal complaint or I don't remember where I read it. Somewhere, though, that the student wasn't even sure what he was going to do with the gun had he gotten his hands on it. And that's, if that in fact is true, that's equally as scary, I think,
Right.
that you get your hands on a weapon and you don't know what you're intending to do with it.
Right.
That could be worse than knowing what you're going to do with it.
So right, and I think as this proceeds through the court system, I think we'll probably be able to learn, or maybe not, learn a little bit more as far as motive is concerned and what intent was behind it.
Yeah.
Right now, it's just information that I'm just as part of you, part of the community, that we just don't know the answer to that yet.
Sure. So, one of the students, I found this fascinating and very proud of this one student also. She's a student at Oshkosh West. She's a Muslim. And, the mosque here in town is directly across the street from Oshkosh West High School. And her father is affiliated with that mosque. And so she knew the code. She had the presence of mind to, remember that code. A lot of times in situations like that, your mind just goes blank, but she remembered what the code was. She encouraged her fellow students, whether they were friends of hers or not. She just said, come on. And I don't know how many went inside. I had heard like 100. I don't know if that's true or not. But she got these fellow students from West into this building for safety. And what I find ironic about that is many years ago when, and this predates you, of course, but when they were first looking at, that used to be a funeral home years ago, and the building, the house right next door to it, they owned the funeral home. And then I guess they built another place somewhere else in town, I don't know. But it was no longer used as a funeral home. And so the Muslim community here in town wanted to use that as a mosque. And it was a very controversial issue in this community because a lot of people said, it doesn't belong here, there's going to be problems, yada, yada, yada. Well, the city, with its infinite wisdom, said, no, we're going to approve this, and it went forward. And to the best of my knowledge, there has not been a single solitary incident at that mosque since they've been there. And they've probably been there, I want to say, right around 8 to 10 years. And so here we have this mosque that a lot of people in the community didn't want, and it became very quickly a safe harbor for these students. So I find the irony there, and I think it's a great story about our Muslim neighbors, that they're not all violent people running around trying to kill Americans and Christians and this kind of thing.
Exactly. And I think that's important. An important distinction is that we have a very diverse community here in Oshkosh, and acceptance of everyone within our community is important, and that people feel as though that they have a sense of belonging, right?
Yep.
And that's important. And you're talking related to the Muslim population and some of the stigmatisms, right?
Yeah.
Which we know so many times are not true, just like mental health.
Yeah.
And so many times people put the stigmatisms that individuals who have mental health concerns are violent people, when in fact it's a stigmatism. That's not
Right,
that's
yeah.
not.
Sometimes they're very passive.
We're talking about such a very minute population,
Yeah.
and even then, within mental health is behavioral health as well, and oftentimes you find that is individuals who have more of that significant behavioral concerns that resort to those the more the violent tendencies.
Sure.
So, but you're absolutely right. Inside, I made that analogy and connection intentionally, is because we've got to remove the stigmatisms.
Yeah. People. We're all people.
Right.
And we all are humans, and life is fragile, and life is important, and one life is not more important than another life.
Right.
And that's how I just think we all should approach life.
Right. I want to go back a little bit as well, because I did not completely answer the question you were asking about preparedness. Yes, we also do safety drills. So we. Previously, we were doing it once a year. We're now going to be doing it twice a year,
Okay.
where we do practice some type of a safety drill. So it's one of our ALICE scenarios that we will practice with our students and our staff. So all staff members get trained on the ALICE modules, and so they're understanding, okay, if I'm in a situation, which action do I take, right? Do I, alert? Do I lock down? Do I inform? Do I confront, or do I evacuate? But we also train our students on this, because there may be a scenario where an adult is not around. And a student has to make a decision on their own. Okay. So we empower our students to be able to make those type of decisions. When you're in the midst of a situation, you have to have the ability to make that decision for yourself. And no decision that you make, if you're walking away from the situation, any decision you made on that was the right decision, because you walked away safely.
Yeah. Or ran away. I'd be running. I'd be running as fast as I could. And that's going to be challenging also, I would think, Vickie, because, we've got, how many schools do we have in the district? 20, okay.
Plus pre-K, so
Okay.
the 4K program.
So we, do they get trained in this also? Or probably not so much, because they're pretty young.
Not as much, because
Yeah.
they're usually located within our schools, or, as you know, our cooperative partners and some of our daycares.
Yeah. But what I was saying is it's got to be a little challenging, because you've got kids all the way from 5 or 4 up to 17 or 18.
Oh, 18, 19, yes.
19 too. Yeah, I guess so. If you're born late in the year and you have to wait.
Early, yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm saying late in the year where you'd have to be held back to start school.
Right.
So, so 17, 18, 19 years old, all the way up from 4 or 5. Everybody has different processes that they go through and different levels of thinking.
Correct.
And, you've got to be able to train all these different age groups.
Appropriately. That's
Yes.
developmentally appropriate for the
Yes.
student and the age of the child that you're working with.
Yeah. So that's not an easy task, I wouldn't think.
Right, because we don't want to scare children.
Right.
But at the same time, we want to make sure they have what's necessary in the event that they're faced with a situation, that they can go home that night.
Yeah. And I do want to, I know you just gave us what the acronym ALICE stands for, but I want to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But what is the difference between a school resource officer and a liaison officer? Are they the same, or are they different? Because I've heard both terminologies used.
Here in Oshkosh?
Yes.
I'm thinking it's just interchanging of the language.
They're one and the same.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. For the most part, the only other thing I could potentially think of is maybe for our DARE program in elementary schools, it may not necessarily be one of our school resource officers.
Okay.
It may be one of the road deputies that comes in that has the training to provide that DARE training.
Okay. So a school resource officer, tell us what their role is. Are they strictly in one school, or do they kind of float between different schools? Are they in the schools full time? help us understand this a little bit better.
Sure, and if you don't mind, I'm also going to take advantage of this part of the conversation because I need help from the community on this as well.
Okay, well, let's get you some help.
Thank you. So with our school resource officers, we do have a full-time officer in each of our high schools.
Okay.
However, in our middle schools, they do go, a couple of our officers will have, well, they rotate from school to school. So we do not have full-time SROs in all 5 of our middle schools.
Okay.
In addition to that, some of our middle school SROs, our school resource officers, also provide some of the instruction at the elementary school level.
Okay.
For the DARE program. So fortunately, because we practice and because we communicate so effectively with one another, if something were to happen and someone was not at that school, the response time would be extremely fast. We know that. We saw that at West High School. Once that first time the message went out for help, I think they said it was about 30 seconds before Officer Gogo was on scene helping. So, which is just incredible.
That is fast.
But frankly speaking, our SROs, yes, their primary role is to serve and protect, right? They're sworn officers.
Sure.
But they really focus on building those relationships with students, being proactive, being a resource for students. So if students need to talk through a situation, or how do I handle this situation? I feel like maybe I'm getting bullied or something like that. And there's a relationship between the student and the SRO.
Right.
They can have that type of conversation.
Sure.
So they're so much more than a law enforcement officer, right? When you look at it within that context.
They're sort of like a counselor and a police officer rolled into one, kind of.
Kind of. Definitely someone to reach out to.
Yeah.
A mentor. Yeah. I think that would be a great way of saying as well, because you have to have a relationship in order to mentor students.
Yeah.
And, where they say, know us before you need us.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. This is a prime opportunity for students to know law enforcement officers. So if there is something going on, they have that trust and that confidence that they can go and get help and know that that's a trusted individual.
Yeah.
Or if they see something, we say, if you see something, say something.
Yep.
Well, if you see something, they have someone that they trust to say something to. Right?
Okay.
And it could be their teachers as well, or their administrators, or any other trusted adult. We know this.
Sure.
So that's important to us. Frankly, I want a full-time SRO in every one of our secondary schools. That's middle school and high school.
Okay.
And right now, that's where we have a partnership with the city. We are very appreciative of that partnership with the city because we split the cost of our SROs with the city. And there's one officer that, quite frankly, they pay for completely. So they're paying
the city does.
Yeah. So they're
Okay.
paying a little bit more than we are in order to ensure that they're school resource officers in the schools.
Sure.
And just in case you give people that question that, well, there's a benefit to that because, quite frankly, if you don't have the SROs in there, the amount that we utilize SROs means that you're calling on road deputies, and it's actually more expensive to the city oftentimes to have that type of response than having a response right there on site.
Yeah.
So... And again, I can't get into the weeds on that because, quite frankly, I haven't looked at the numbers myself to analyze that and to say, I know that for a fact, but I believe that's part of the rationale behind it. So
I think that's probably very true. It makes sense to me.
Right.
You know.
And that's how it's been explained to me. But again, quite frankly,
still new.
I have not had that level of conversation with our city manager, Mark Roloff, to see if that truly is the accurate. So I don't want to misrepresent either.
Right. But it makes sense.
Yeah. So this is what we're doing. The school district has a fund, and it's called Fund 80. Fund 80 is how we pay for the rec center, any of the community services that we provide throughout the Oshkosh area community. We run it through this fund code, and it's called Fund 80. It comes on your tax bill as the school district taxes, but it is to pay for community services. And right now, it is my interpretation, I have not put this in front of legal, but I believe this is a common interpretation. If you pay for school resource officers out of Fund 80, then it means that if a community member wants to utilize the services of a school resource officer, even during the school day, then we have to provide that access. Well, then that means I'm pulling the school resource officers out of the schools.
Yeah.
And so I've already made the request with a couple of our local legislators. Can we please look at the definition of what a school resource officer is under this fund code, so that the school district can pay for the SROs and we can get full-time officers in all of our schools.
Sure.
And so what happens, because when you think about it, quite frankly, our schools are community events.
Yeah.
We have adults in our schools every single day, throughout the day, doing multiple things, and because we have partnerships.
Sure.
We are so fortunate to have partnerships coming in and businesses coming in to read to our students or to hold different events.
Or to volunteer.
Exactly. You have your after-school events. Maybe it's a musical or an athletic event. Well, it's a lot more than just the students attending that. It's your community.
Yep.
And so I'm asking them to look at it through the lens of that definition, because they are serving the community, but with the primary function being to be there at the school.
Sure.
And that's where I need a little bit of help from our community, is helping me with this conversation with that definition, so that way we can look at it coming from Fund 80. And I know people are going to say, well, wait a minute, then how's that going to impact my tax bill? But yes, it is, but at the same time, now the city's not necessarily paying for it. So if you're within the city, it's kind of a wash.
Right. It'll come out of one pocket as opposed to the other.
Right, but there will be an increase because, as I mentioned before, there are not full-time SROs in all of our schools. So we know this.
Right.
But I also have to ask, how can we help our schools become even safer than what they are? And I know having someone there as a first-hand immediate responder is one of those techniques that really pays off in the dividend, the long term on this.
Yeah.
And we have some other things that we're looking at right now on our immediate needs. Quite frankly, our school board is starting to talk about it right now because the Facility Advisory Committee had just made their recommendations to the board. So this has happened since last time we talked.
Okay.
Made their recommendations to the board, and one of the recommendations is to go for an April 2020 referendum for capital improvement. So people also have to understand that capital means your physical structures and those kind of things, which is different than your operational. Operational are people, services, and those kind of things. But within that referendum, the referendum is very specific. It's for safety and security and emergent infrastructure needs that we have. So that was the part of that community survey and what we had put out there, where we said looking at for safety and security was like the festivals, the entrances to our schools where we don't have as secured. We would like to do that. In light of the recent incident, there are some things that we've been able to go back and take a look at as well. So, for example, our PA systems, right now they're analog. And so if you're teaching in the classroom and you have, let's say you have a YouTube video related to the content that you're teaching, of course, so it's related. So, but then when the PA comes on, you may or may not hear it. Right? Because there's a video going on that may be louder. Right. And so we're looking at a system that is more IP-based, so that way you can push information out from multiple places and into multiple places. So, for example, you're watching the video with an IP-type system that we're looking at, it shuts down the video and pushes out the message on there. So immediately people are seeing what's going on.
Oh, well, that's cool. That's cool.
And time is of the essence. Seconds matter.
Okay. So you are asking for the public's help with what exactly? To help pass this referendum then that's coming up in April?
Ultimately, yes, but currently, just in the conversation, if you're talking with a local legislator, or maybe not a local legislator, maybe you have a relative or
someone who's got control of something
or has some connections. To bring this back up and looking at it from a legislative standpoint as to the interpretation of how Fund 80 can be used in relation to school resource officers.
Okay, all right. Okay, so, boy, I didn't even finish with this one topic.
And I gave you a whole bunch.
And now I've got some more stuff. And so I've been making some notes here. And I guess, I'm going to jump up to some of these things while they're still fresh in my mind.
Certainly.
And while we're talking about them. And then we can go back to some of this other stuff. So a safety and security referendum is going to be showing up on our April ballot. This is December.
It's a referendum that will address school safety and security and immediate infrastructure needs, as well as infrastructure needs related to safety and security.
Right. So that'll be showing up on the
We don't know yet. The board hasn't made that decision. They're still in
that's
discussion.
What you're wanting to do.
Well, that was the recommendation from the Facility Advisory Committee, and these are the discussions currently happening with the board. They're going to meet again on January the 8th.
Okay.
So we want the community to pay attention. We're asking them to listen to the conversations because we want our community to be informed. And then we know there's going to be a special board meeting called relatively close to the January 8th meeting, at probably the next week. We don't know yet. We're working on details, as you might say.
Sure.
And then at that meeting, that's when the board will probably decide, okay, do we really want to go forward with this recommendation or not?
And you probably don't know the answer to this because it is still so much in the early stages and discussion stages. But if this were to be put on a ballot in 4 months from now, 3.5 months actually, because it'll be the first Tuesday in April. So what do you anticipate, if you know, what would something like this cost? What's the amount that you guys would be looking for?
That I don't know just yet because we're working on that.
It's still too early.
The January 8th meeting will have a much better idea.
Okay.
I believe we surveyed right around $21 million on this, I believe is what we surveyed for. And the results of the survey, the community absolutely supported that.
Okay.
It's just we know now, given the incidences and really examining, okay, we really want to ensure that we're truly on the cutting edge of these things.
Sure.
We know that it's going to be more than that. We just don't know the exact cost of that just yet. $21 million.
More than $21 million.
Yeah.
Okay. That is a lot of money. I don't think anybody would disagree with me on that. I'm going to play devil's advocate here, Vickie, because, in addition to being someone who wants our schools to be safe and the people in them to be safe, I'm also a taxpayer. You're a taxpayer. We're all taxpayers here. And there's only so much money to go around.
I understand.
Now, we just got our tax bills in the last week or two here in the city. And, it's a bill that's sent out by City Hall, but they're just sort of the messenger because all the other things are, the technical college and the county and the school district. All of that is on the one tax bill, along with the taxes from the city. But there was a note at the bottom of the tax bill that it said for informational purposes only that I can't remember exactly how much ours was. I want to say it was like $80-some or something like that. But when I questioned what this was for, I was told that it's for a school referendum that had passed. And that's going to go until I believe it was 2023. Could be wrong on that date, but it's for the next 3 years or so. And so here we've got that we're just starting to pay on, and now all of a sudden we've got another referendum that is being put in front of us, and the district is going to be, if this passes, to go onto the ballot, they're going to want us to support this. I'm torn. I have to be honest with you. I'm torn. Like I said, I want safe schools. I want everyone in the schools to be safe. But I only have so much money. Everybody only makes so much money. And, you know, I think a more fair thing would be to start asking our lawmakers in Madison to start returning some of our shared revenues to us. And this predates you also, because they have been, over the years, taking more and more money away. Shared revenues they were designed initially to, you know, come back to the communities who need them, who paid for them. And so my thought is, well, why did we send them the money in the first place if it's supposed to come back to us? But there's probably something there that I'm missing in the process.
Do you mind if I talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure, go ahead. Because I do think that, you know, they should be sending our money back to us for things like this.
Well,
not very much, though.
No. For capital referendums.
Okay.
Not operational, but for capital well, I don't know about operational because I haven't delved deep into that just yet. But for capital referendums, whenever we do a capital referendum, so Oak Lawn Elementary School, the state actually helps pay off that referendum. So other communities are helping us pay off that referendum. If you are considered to be a low spending district, which Oshkosh Area School District is,
all right.
Any district that is considered to be a low spending district, the state contributes money towards that referendum.
Okay.
So, for example, we have a few districts around us that are building these beautiful facilities while we continue to age. And Oshkosh, you're helping pay for those facilities in those other schools.
Now, see, I didn't know that. So thank you for sharing that, because I did not. So we're paying for these other beautiful schools. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Well, how in the hell is that fair?
Well, because they're also low spending districts. Our income taxes are split up accordingly, and school districts that have are low spending, low spending districts such as Oshkosh receive additional funding from the state when you have a capital referendum on the plate.
Okay.
So the citizens of Oshkosh Area School District are not on the hook for 100% of the cost for Oak Lawn Elementary School. Okay. Another thing that happened within the tax bill, I know everyone was saying, holy cow, it went up, I think was 4% or something to that effect. Statewide, it was 4.5%. So we were still even below what the entire state did. Wow. In addition to that, for the voucher program, and you don't see this. Last year we paid out approximately $800,000 in vouchers. This year we almost doubled that, almost $1.6 million of public funds being utilized to pay for vouchers for students who go to private schools. Okay. And it's going to continue to increase. Yeah. Not only that, but also the Fund 80 thing. It runs through the school system, but it is a community service in order to provide services to the community. Yeah,
well, thank you for educating me on some of this stuff, because, referendums, the whole taxing thing, when you start talking about mill rates and all this stuff, it's mind-boggling. Yeah. I feel like my brain is being squeezed and twisted by an anaconda.
I'm sorry.
Anaconda, it's just, no, not you. Just the whole concept, the whole conversation, it can be overwhelming, really, and yet you're a bright woman. I know you know what I'm talking about when I say that people are they're stretched. If a tax bill for any taxing entity goes up 4% or 4.5%, I look at people's household budgets, and have they gone up that much in a year's time? And that's just for one taxing entity. Then, do you have the others that have maybe increased just a little bit? I don't know what the answer is, but we've got a lot of elderly people in this community, and I just fear that some are just simply being taxed out of their homes because they can no longer afford it. So I don't know what the answer is.
And I do respect that position. I just get concerned because, as I was mentioning, and I wasn't trying to be flippant or facetious.
No.
But when we're trying to help people understand that we have facilities. The average age of our facilities are 78 years old. Merrill's 119 years old.
Yeah.
And so what happens when the facility just gets to that point where it can't go any further?
Yeah.
What do we do? And so that's a concern. The other thing as well is with the operational referendum, as I mentioned before. So these are services, personnel, like it could be a variety of different things. And people oftentimes are saying, well, why do we have to pay for you to operate? The state should be doing that as well. Well, when the revenue limits went into effect back in the 1990s, Oshkosh was a low revenue district. So we were well below the state average of what we were taxing for back then.
Yeah.
And it froze.
Yeah.
And so when you compound that year after year after year, and then you put on top of that inflationary cost, the district just got to a point where unless we cut arts, extracurricular programs, and so many others, because I know Mr. Mack has come on here before to talk about that.
Yes.
Unless we go to operational referendum, those were the things that were going to be cut. Because we just couldn't do it any longer because we weren't taxing at least the state average. You know, looking at it, just going over, just doing a minimum, and I haven't gotten into the weeds on it, but just doing a very low-level estimate of how low we've been below the state average for compounding for that number of years. That's almost an entire year's budget for me.
Yeah.
The differences over that period of time. It may actually be more.
Yeah.
I did a lowball estimate. And so when you look at that, you take into the account for inflationary cost as well. So yes, we did have to go for operational referendum in order to just continue to run the district. That is coming back up. So I want to make sure people are aware of that too. But here's I'm going to give you some good news, all right?
Please do.
Two things. It's because we're listening to our community. We're hearing that there's some not operational, but referendum fatigue. Well, we have two operational referendums. So we have an opportunity. We can combine those into one. And then just renew just one. So that way it's keeping you out of the ballot. And it's not going to increase your tax. You're already paying on it. So it's not going to be an increase from what you're really seeing right now, or if it is, it's ever so slightly, right? And so that way we can go for one and either be a 7-year, or we could even look at, because there are multiple districts across the state that do this as well, just a recurring. In other words, you vote for it once and you don't have to worry about going back to the ballot again. It just stays there. And we're still a low spending district. We're still below the state average. You know, the Wisconsin Policy Forum put out an article here, Northwestern reported on it this morning. They said, you know, the districts, everyone received an additional $175 per pupil expenditure. So in other words, every student received an additional $175 from the state, basically. And then low spending districts, the ceiling for that was raised to $9,700. So it sounds like we would have $9,700 plus the $175, right?
Yeah.
The way in which it was written. That is not what happened. So what happened is they added on the $175 first and then put the ceiling on there. So whereas if you were at the state average or above, so let's say you were at the state average at $10,100. You're now at $10,275.
Okay.
And we're still below the state average, but at $9,700, and so that gap still exists. But I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, so I want to make that clear too, because it was better than nothing, and I mean that significantly. Because if you were to go back, and I did the analysis looking at the last year that Governor Doyle was in office, to Tony Evers' budget that was passed by our mostly Republican House, so it's bipartisan is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
When you account and look at the difference in there was a huge. It looks like there's a huge increase, but when you account for consumer price index, we're still below where we would have been funded the last year when Doyle was in office. Yeah.
Well, even though you've given me some not so great news about another possible referendum coming up, I will pay you a compliment, Vickie, and tell you this. For someone who has only been here a little over a year, I mean, you're talking back in Governor Doyle's, time.
I do my research.
You do. And, that's one thing that I have always been impressed with the school district. Even an interim superintendent that we had, Betty something or other. God, I can't think of her last name. It'll come to me as soon as I say goodbye to everybody. But she came in, she was only here temporarily, and she knew that. But boy, she knew every single thing, and she didn't miss a beat. And Stan Mack was the same way when he was here. You are the same way. I give you so much credit because your brain has to have so much stuff stuffed in it that I don't even know how you do it.
I have a great team. I have a phenomenal team, and I kudos to them. Even though we started talking about, with the incident at West, I'll be frank with you. I'm so proud of our staff members. I'm so proud of my team and all the administrators and how they handled it across the district, because we really pulled together to get us through that incident.
Yeah.
And then I am so incredibly grateful to our community, to our partners, and how they just embraced us and really they showed love and compassion. And that is exactly what our students and our teachers needed at that time.
Yeah. Well, and I will echo those comments. And there were officers from so many different communities. We had the Sheriff's Department, we had the Oshkosh Police Department,
the State Department,
we had the State Patrol was here.
OMRO,
I think Winneconne was here. There were a lot of officers here, and I'm not sure why they came from all these other areas. Maybe it was they didn't really know up front what exactly they were dealing with, but it was really quite something. And I have to say that I did not even know at first that this was going down, and I only live like 3 blocks from West. And I had to run some errands, and I was trying to get out of town for a funeral. So I'm driving around, and all these streets are blocked off, and I'm like, why can't I get anywhere here? I couldn't even take my normal route to get on the highway. And I'm like, what is going on here? I can't seem to go anywhere. I wanted to just say the hell with it and drive back home and stay in my house. But I finally figured out how to get out of here. But there were no sirens that I heard of, and I talked to some other people, and they didn't hear any either. They saw a lot of squad cars flying down the street.
I heard sirens, though.
Did you?
I
did you?
I
Okay,
did.
yeah.
Maybe not as to the extent of what you would think you would hear.
In an incident like that,
right.
yeah. And even when I got back from the funeral from up in Appleton, I still couldn't get anywhere. I'm like, oh my God, But by that time, I knew what was going on because I'd gotten the press release on my phone. So I'm like, okay, now I get it as to what's going on here and why I can't seem to get anywhere. So fortunately, I figured out some back routes to get home, and that took care of that. But I also want to say that when Officer Wissink was released from the hospital up in Appleton and escorted back to Oshkosh, I don't know who came up with the idea that they had to escort him back, but I thought it was just a tremendously wonderful showing that you guys did. Who came up with that idea? Was it a joint thing, or who decided to do that?
So the chief and police and myself had conversations. He initiated the conversation. It's like, we'd like to show support and those kind of things. We want to come by this school. And I said, okay. So then on my end, of course, the school district end, I should say, we took care of the details and making sure that we were able to get what you saw actually occur. And working carefully to get a press release out as well, because while we wanted it to be, it was important to be a surprise, we didn't want to reshock the community.
Right, yeah.
With that number of police.
What's going on now?
Right. And any parent or community member who wanted to come and join us and acknowledging Officer Wissink was really important. And it was such a healing process for for him, but also us as a community, for our students to be able to see him. And just,
because he is so well liked.
he is.
He really
As I
is
said
well
before,
liked over there.
our SROs, they have relationships with children
Yep.
and students, and in this case, young adults.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yes.
Yeah. So with our time quickly running out, I want to address the ALICE training. So ALICE is an acronym for Alert,
Lockdown,
Okay.
Inform,
Yes.
Counter,
Okay.
Evacuate.
Okay. So I'm sure that this next question is going to be part of this training. And this training is not unique to Oshkosh.
No,
I've heard of
no,
it being
it's
used
national.
elsewhere too. So I have heard that some students are told to run.
Evacuate.
Yes, and others are basically told to shelter in place, which I would assume is the lockdown part
Correct.
of it. So
Barricade.
how do
lock.
you decide, well, who makes the decision, and how do they decide what students are going to run and get away and what students are going to stay in a lockdown situation?
Sure. So that's the inform piece. That's critically important.
Okay.
And a lot of times, so oftentimes it's the adults that are in the situation that make the decisions and then instruct students on how to proceed. But as I mentioned before, if there's not an adult that is available, then that student has to make that decision. And they make that decision based off the information that they know at that point in time.
Okay.
All right. So if there's an assailant and they're at the front of the school and you're in the back of the school, get out there.
Okay.
Evacuate. There's no reason to lock down and barricade because there's no reason. You can remove yourself from that concern. But if you're close to that, it's not safe perhaps for you to run, right?
Sure,
because
yep.
that
You
may
may
be
run
an easy
right into them.
Right, exactly. So at that point in time, it is important to lock down, barricade the route as much as you can. Make sure that you're ready to confront. That's where you're grabbing staplers, whatever it is. So that way, if the person makes it through the barricade, they're going to get attacked. You know,
yeah.
and not physically, for people on them, but things are going to be flying across the room. In order to try to overcome that individual,
Sure.
so that you remove the safety risk.
One question that someone asked me, and I didn't know the answer to this, so I want to ask you this. Are students allowed to have their cell phones on their person in the classrooms?
So it depends on the classroom teacher. Oftentimes, some of them will have them leave their cell phones in maybe like a little cubby area right by the door.
Okay.
Some of them are allowed to have them on their personal possessions, and the reason is because some teachers actually use cell phones, to do maybe little things for them to
gotcha.
do that. Whereas if there's not a use for it, and it's more of a distraction, then they may have them leave it by the front door.
Okay. And then as far as, a lot of students in high school drive to school. I know I did. And I was the pride of all my friends because I was the only one with a car. So so I got to play taxi driver and chauffeur. But, why is it that students who drive there, why would they not be allowed to get out of there, get in their cars, and go? They need to keep their cars on site. Why is that?
It becomes a safety risk in and of itself, because if you're fleeing, are you thinking about the person who just walked in front of you?
Okay, gotcha. All right, makes total sense. When were students allowed to go back and get their cars?
So the incident occurred on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, as you know, we shut down school everywhere. Thursday was the day we had a designated time on Thursday where students, I believe it was Thursday. My mind is escaping me now, but we opened it up from 10 to noon. Yeah, it was on Thursday.
Yep.
And students, loved ones of students, caregivers of students, people who was there to support students, could come with the students in order to retrieve their belongings, and then they were able to go and get their vehicles. Now, if they had a spare set of keys before, they could have gotten their vehicle before.
Sure, you could go at night. And
Well,
whatever.
once we were free and clear.
Yeah.
Right.
So, Okay, very good. Well, we did not, I had other questions and we didn't even get to them, but that's good. That's fine. Now I have more questions for the next time. So,
Understood.
but I really want to thank you, Vickie, for taking time out to come chat with us, explain so much more about this, so that now we all have a better understanding, whether it's of what went down that day or it's how you guys train and the methodologies that you use in training and teaching kids appropriate responses for their age and that kind of thing. I tried to get you on 2 weeks ago, but that was just 2 days after the incident,
No.
and I wanted to be so timely, but I certainly understood that you couldn't because you had your very first school function that night after
At
this
West.
happened, and you needed to be there, and
Right.
we understand that. So
We appreciate it.
Yeah. So, but now I'm going to have you back on again fairly soon.
right.
Please don't have any more incidents,
No.
so that we can get to these other questions. But thank you very
No,
much.
I appreciate
And
it.
thanks to everyone who participated in this for the excellent job that they did, and to the community as well. Those few who were snickering, though, accepted. So. Anyway, have a nice Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Well, to you as well.
And thank you.
again, we are just eternally grateful to our community and very appreciative of the level of support they're giving us. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thanks to the crew, and as always, thanks to you. We will see you next time and in the new year. So until then, take good care. Happy holidays to you, and keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.